give it to you in the instructions at the end of the trial. With that, Mr. Wyzak, you may proceed.
Your Honor, the state is going to call Jenna Corso.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Corso, can you introduce yourself to the jury, please?
Hi everyone, I'm Jenna Corso. I'm the supervisor for Toledo 911.
All right, and how long have you been employed with Toledo Police Department?
For almost 16 years.
And what are your responsibilities within 911?
I'm the supervisor for all 911 call takers for City of Toledo and also the police dispatchers for City of Toledo.
All right, and can you explain to the jury the process for receiving 911 calls in Toledo?
Sure, you get a 911 call when you guys call. It goes to a call taker. Call taker will take the information from you, location, what's going on, stuff like that. They put the call into our computer system. Computer system automatically goes to the dispatcher. The dispatcher will then send a crew out when available.
All right, and does your particular unit hold on to these recordings?
Yes,
Are
sir.
they're stored?
Yes, sir.
All right, and they're kept within the ordinary course of business of the City of Toledo?
Yes, sir.
All right, and how long does Toledo Police Department maintain a record of 911 calls?
2 years.
And does the Toledo Police Department have a log that they maintain along with the 911 call?
Yes, we have an incident detail report for each call.
I'm going to approach the witness, Your Honor, with State's Exhibit number 1.
All right, you may.
Do you recognize State's Exhibit number 1?
Yes, sir.
And what is that?
Certificate of authenticity?
And is that related to a 911 call that was placed on January 31st of 2018 at 5801 Telegraph Road?
Yes.
All right, and is that your signature on the bottom of the certificate?
Yes, sir.
What is the date of the certification?
February 8th of 2018.
All right, Your Honor, at this time the State would move to admit State's Exhibit number 1 into evidence.
No objection.
Will be received. Thank you.
I'm also going to approach with State's Exhibit number 2. Is this a copy of the 911 call that was placed on January 31st, 2018 from 5801 Telegraph Road?
Yes, sir.
And prior to trial, have you had an opportunity to listen to that particular recording?
Yes, sir.
And is that a fair and accurate representation of the call that was placed on that particular day?
Yes, sir.
And again, that particular 911 call that's kept in the ordinary course of business of the Toledo Police Department?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this time, the State would move to admit State's Exhibit number 1 into evidence and request permission to publish it to the jury.
No objection.
Be received. You may go ahead and publish.
Number 2, sorry.
Yeah, you said 1.
Oh, I apologize. State's Exhibit number 2 is going to admit evidence.
All right, and Mr. Ryan, he is correct that it's State Exhibit 2.
No objection.
All right, so both 1 and 2 are admitted. We may publish number 2.
Very hard. they do not hang up, I'll transfer you to medical. Okay.
Any questions, Jeremy? Thank you.
I have no further
Go
questions.
ahead.
Good morning, Ms. Corso.
Morning.
Just one question for you. You heard that he didn't say he was trying to break up a fight. Did you hear any of that?
Yes, sir. He was trying to assist his friend.
He didn't say he was trying to break up a fight. The words was he was trying to help his friend, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing further now.
Okay, any, regard?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right, yeah, thank you. Step down.
Thank you.
Your Honor, the state's next witness is Gina Shabeta.
Right this way, please. Would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Thank you.
Morning, Ms. Shabeta. Can you introduce yourself to the jury, please?
Yes, my name is Gina Maria Shabeta,
And how long have you been employed by Toledo Fire and Rescue?
for 17 years.
And what is your position within the department?
I am a private Toledo firefighter and paramedic. I'm also on the technical rescue team, technical rescue specialist.
All right. And what are your duties and responsibilities as a paramedic?
As a paramedic, to provide medical care to patients, we do IV therapy, medication administration, 12 leads. We do some surgical procedures as well, among lots of other duties as a paramedic.
And what is your educational background?
I graduated from Macaulay Catholic High School, attended several classes at the University of Toledo, as well as Owens Community College. I did graduate with the Fire Academy at Owens Community College. I'm also an advanced life support instructor with Lucas County for the paramedics, and a basic life support instructor as well.
And did you receive any additional training outside of that educational background that would assist in your position?
Yes, I did complete the accelerated paramedic course, which is 6 months. It entails going to class 8 hours a day, plus clinicals after. Also the National Registry Emergency Medical Technician Paramedic exam I passed, and I am state certified as a paramedic as well.
All right. And if you're deployed to a situation where somebody needs assistance, how many people are you usually working with?
And it really varies on the incident. Can be as minimal as 2 firefighters on an ambulance, can be 4 apparatus or even more. Some scenes require 12, even more firefighters, paramedics, specialists.
So it pretty much depends on the situation, right?
It really does depend on the situation.
All right. Do you recall whether you were on duty on January 31st of 2018?
Yes, I was on duty.
And did you respond to a call for service at 5801 Telegraph Road?
Yes, I did.
And is that located in Toledo, Lucas County, Ohio?
It is, yes.
And do you remember the nature of that call?
The nature of the call was an unconscious person.
All right. Do you recall approximately what time you arrived on scene?
Yes, approximately 0:55 hours.
So that'd be 12:55 a.m.?
Correct.
All right. And can you describe for the jury what you saw when you arrived?
Yes, when we arrived, there were civilians outside. There were several Toledo police officers also. When we arrived inside the establishment, we did see a male patient laying in right lateral position on the ground, unconscious, appeared to be unconscious at the time, and was breathing.
So when you say right lateral, does that mean he was laying on his right side?
That's correct, on his right side.
All right, and he was unconscious at that time?
Yes, he was.
And you indicated he was breathing?
Yes, he was.
During the course of assisting that particular individual, did he ever stop breathing in your presence?
No, he did not.
And did you learn the identity of that individual while you were at the bar rendering assistance?
My officer did learn the identity of the individual.
All right, do you recall the name?
I don't recall his first name, Mr. Vasquez, last name.
All right. Now, do you recall what time they began rendering assistance to Mr. Vasquez?
Yeah, well, once arrival into the establishment within 1 minute.
All right. And do you recall what his respiratory rate was?
Yeah, initially his respiratory rate was at 14 breaths per minute.
And what is the average respiratory rate for an adult human?
For an adult, the average respiratory rate is between 12 and 20 respirations per minute.
All right, so at that time, even though he was unconscious, he was still in the average respiratory rate, is that
That's correct.
All right. Based upon his condition at the time that you saw him, did you have any concerns about his ability to maintain that respiratory rate?
We did have concern based on what we were told and based on the blunt trauma to his head. So we did have some concerns for him to maintain his airway. So we did provide precautionary assistance and we monitored his SpO2.
All right, and can you tell the jury what SpO2 is?
The SpO2 is the measurement of the oxygen saturation in the blood. We use a device called a pulse oximetry. It's most beneficial when it's used on the non-dominant hand ring finger, although we don't always use that. But that's what we use to monitor the measurement of the oxygen saturation in the blood.
Now, you indicated that you had received some information related to why he was unconscious. Is that correct?
Correct.
And do you try to obtain that information so we have an idea of what you're dealing with?
Absolutely. We try to get the history of the individual, of why this person may potentially be unconscious. And in this particular case, it was due to blunt trauma by way of a fist to his head several times.
All right, and that was communicated to you by individuals at the bar?
That's affirmative.
All right. Can you
Objection as to hearsay, Your Honor.
It's overruled. Proceed.
Are you familiar with Narcan?
Yes.
And what is Narcan?
Narcan is a narcotic antagonist, and this completely inhibits the effect of the narcotic agent. Also, it is a reversal for respiratory depression in the case of opiate use.
All right, so if somebody is overdosed due to opiates, is that a circumstance where you would apply Narcan?
That's correct. Yes, we would.
All right, and in that particular circumstance, are individuals that have overdosed on opiates, are they generally breathing?
They can be breathing, but their respiratory would potentially be depressed.
Okay. Did you have any reason to believe that Narcan was required in this particular circumstance?
We had no reason to believe to use Narcan. There was no suspicion of narcotic use or that anybody told us that there was any narcotic use.
All right, and did you receive any information about whether Mr. Vasquez was ingesting alcohol at this location?
We did detect a smell of odor, alcohol odor on his breath.
Do you recall what time you left the scene with Mr. Vasquez?
We left the scene within approximately 10 minutes of patient arrival. Not exactly sure what time, but it was within 10 minutes.
And do you recall approximately what time you arrived at the hospital with Mr. Vasquez?
That was within 10 minutes of departing the scene. We arrived at the hospital.
Was that at Mercy St. Vincent Medical Center?
Yes, it was.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move to admit State's Exhibit number 13, which is the certified copy of the record of treatment that Mr. Vasquez received at Mercy St. Vincent Medical Center. We do so pursuant to revised code section 2913 or 2917.422A. This is a self-authenticating document.
Sorry,
Objection.
all right, will be received.
Did you have any further interaction with Mr. Vasquez once you released him to the staff of the hospital?
No, we took him to that particular hospital because we did declare him to be an adult major trauma, which is the highest level trauma there is, and particularly to St. V's because that is one of only 3 of the level 1 trauma centers in the city, and it was the closest in proximity to us.
And so does that mean that he was in need of critical care at that point?
Correct.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Mr. Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. And I'm going to approach the witness, Your Honor. I want to use this document. I'm trying to see this document.
What was it, Mark?
Proposed defendant exhibit A, Your Honor.
All right, thank you.
Have you seen that document?
I have some documents. I don't see the names of the individuals who were on this report. I was just trying to determine that, sir.
If you look at,
Forgive me, it's just small print. I apologize.
if you look at page 91, the 3rd page to that exhibit, and it says personnel right midway there. This is Azevedo, Richard Doran, and Gina Shabeta.
Yes, sir.
All right. And have you seen this document?
I'm not sure that I have seen this one. I don't recall seeing this one. Let me see here.
You are Ms. Shabeta, correct, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Your name is on this document, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That is my name.
And you see in that document where it says, on the first page, on page 89, it says the injury in the top right-hand corner, it says assault with a blunt object. Do you see where this says that?
I see injury of head. I'm trying to find where it says
It's
blunt.
about, let's take 6 rows down.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I see it.
It says assault with a blunt object, correct, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
All right. Do you normally put a solid blunt object if it's a punch that hits someone?
Yes, sir.
You do?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what about, let's go to the 2nd page. In midway of the page where that, may I approach the witness, Your Honor, just to show what I'm looking at.
Oh, interesting. Oh, boy.
Yeah. It's very small writing. Ms. Shabeta, but doesn't it say that patient was in a fight at a bar and was down and kicked in the head?
Yes, sir. It does say that.
Unknown how many times, correct, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
And snoring, respirations at his sleep, breathing fairly normal, correct, ma'am?
As if asleep, breathing fairly. Yes, correct.
And then let's go up to the top there. right where it says where it says category and it says I can't make that out, it says something status. It says patient hit in the head during a bar fight according to witnesses. Do you see where it says that?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any reason to doubt that?
No, sir.
I'd like to move to admission of Exhibit A, as her name is on this particular document, as one of the persons that participated in the
Sidebar.
Thank you.
By the way, I apologize. The objection is sustained, but you may proceed, sir.
Ms. Shabeta, do you know what this document is?
I believe this is the Toledo Fire and Rescue Department report that was made by the officer on scene.
And is this document that is normally used in your course of business as to jot down actually to who was there, what was done, at what time the incident happened, and things of that nature, ma'am?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. And did you author this document?
No, I did not.
And I still move to admit this document as a business record in the normal course of business pursuant to the code exactly as the prosecution has stated. One, I feel it is a medical record. The second.
Once again, if we're not spoken argument on an objection or admission,
Okay,
we'll do that
that's fine.
sidebar. Sir, do you need a sidebar?
No, I don't need to.
Okay. State.
I'm just objecting for the previous stated reasons.
The objection is still sustained.
You indicated, Ms. Shabeta, that there was not any, you couldn't tell at that time when you arrived on the scene whether there was any narcotics in the system, correct?
I'm sorry, could you
You
repeat?
indicated that the individual, the deceased, that you couldn't identify whether there was any narcotics in the system, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, at that time?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Did you later realize that there was narcotics in the system?
Oh, negative, no.
You didn't?
No.
And is that something that you normally would go back and see what type of drugs was in the individual system, patient system?
No, sir.
Okay. So you want to know after the fact, after arriving on the scene, take him to the hospital, and the hospital takes over from there, correct, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Judge, may I approach you, please? Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Nothing further.
Okay, redraw.
No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right, thank you. Step down.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, the next witness for the state of Ohio is Dr. Robert Forney.
Good morning. Please raise your hand, please. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Good morning, Dr. Forney.
Good morning.
Can you introduce yourself to the jury, please?
Yeah. Robert B. Forney, Jr.
All right, and where are you employed, sir?
I'm employed at the Lucas County Coroner's Office.
And what is your position with the Lucas County Coroner's Office?
I'm the chief toxicologist.
All right, and how long have you held that position?
I came to Toledo from Case Western Reserve and Cuyahoga County Coroner's Office in 1976.
So
I've
for a
been
long
a happy resident ever since.
All right, what is your educational background, sir?
Excuse me. I did a pre-medical undergraduate degree at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. And then I was in the Peace Corps for about 3 years in Southeast Asia, doing public health village to village. And then I attended Indiana University School of Medicine in Indianapolis, but I got a PhD rather than an MD in toxicology with a minor in pharmacology. After that, I did a residency in Cleveland at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine in the departments of pathology and the Department of Medicine. And I also had an appointment with the coroner.
And do you hold any certifications?
There's a board certification in forensic toxicology, and I obtained that after my residency.
And do you belong to any professional associations?
Yeah, all the usual alphabet soup. The American Academy of Forensic Science is probably the premier forensic organization with all the different specialties, not just toxicology. Then the Society of Forensic Toxicologists, which is SOFT. And that would be the toxicologists only. And then TAF is an International Association of Forensic Toxicologists, and those are the principal ones.
All right, and do you hold any teaching positions currently?
Yes, I've been in academic medicine. I taught in Cleveland medical students and residents about toxicology. And I've done that here I was hired actually by the Medical College of Ohio in the departments of pharmacology and pathology. And about 15 years ago, I retired from there, but I still hold a teaching position. It's called a clinical associate professor. What that means is they don't pay me. They give you a fancy title and then they don't have to pay you.
All right, and have you previously been qualified to testify as an expert witness?
Yes, many times.
And whereabouts?
Well, when you get to be old like me, you become something of a... I've testified all over the country. I've been qualified from California to Florida to New York.
Approach was State's Exhibit number 14.
Mr. Adam, it's a CB.
Recognize State's Exhibit number 14, Dr. Forney.
I do.
And what is contained within State's Exhibit number 14?
That's my curriculum type.
All right, is that a fair and accurate representation of your educational background, training, and professional experience?
It is.
Here, at this time, the state would move to admit State's Exhibit number 14 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
Will you receive?
Doctor, I'm going to approach you again. Dr. State's Exhibit number 16 is a composite exhibit that contains the case summary for the autopsy report, coroner's verdict, and also the toxicology report, which is at the end of the packet. Can you look through the toxicology report, please? Yes. And does that appear to be a fair and accurate representation of toxicology report associated with the autopsy performed on Daniel Vasquez?
Yes,
All right, and have you had an opportunity to review that report prior to your testimony today?
I have.
All right, and before I go any further, Your Honor, the state would move to qualify Dr. Forney as an expert witness in toxicology.
Do you care to voir dire the witness?
No objection. No objection.
All right, any objection?
No.
All right, declared an expert in forensic, forensic toxicology. Sorry, there's another witness that will be in pathology. Go ahead.
All right, Doctor, can you please explain to the jury what substances were in Mr. Vasquez's system?
Yes, first of all, you have to define in his system. We analyzed both blood and urine. So technically, the substances we detected in his urine were not in his system. That is, they were not having an effect on him at the time the samples were collected, which was in the hospital. We received some urine. We collected some urine at autopsy. And if you see urine only, those are the ones collected at autopsy. The ones that say urine, parentheses A, close parentheses, plus, those, there's a footnote, and that means they were ante-mortem urine. So those were specimens that were collected in the hospital before he died. Actually, they were collected on the day of his injury. And so in his system, that is in his blood, he had the opiate analgesic fentanyl. Fentanyl is commonly used in hospitals as a pain reliever. We detected a low level of fentanyl. It was actually less than typical therapeutic concentrations.
Your Honor, I would object to the continuance statements by this witness. I think it's non-responsive. It's up and above and along above the question that was posed to this particular witness, Your Honor.
The objection is overruled. He is answering the question as asked. As soon as he's done answering the question, sir, if you would be so kind as to ask the next question, but we'll allow you to answer first. Okay. All right, thank you.
Dr. Forney, we'll go one by one. All right. So let's backtrack first, since we started with urine. Okay. The report indicates that there was a THC in the urine sample.
Well, actually, it's THC-COOH.
Okay.
It's the carboxylic acid metabolite of THC.
All right.
And we did detect it in the urine collected at autopsy.
All right. So, and just to be clear, that's a metabolite for marijuana?
Yes, it's an inactive metabolite.
All right. So with that particular substance, since it was an inactive metabolite in his urine, the impacting him at the time he was alive?
Well, it was collected at autopsy, which was several days after he was admitted to the hospital. What it means, marijuana has many different chemicals in them. About 60 of them are cannabinoids, and the cannabinoids are fat soluble, and they stay in the body for a long time because the body gets rid of drugs and chemicals through the water, not through the fat. And so, for example, the brain is fat. I've got some fat here, and so that's where these drugs stay, and so it slows down their elimination. So that means what I wrote was that he had been recently exposed, and recent could be hours or days before the injury. But it's inactive, and so there was no evidence that he was under the influence of marijuana at the time of his death.
The next three samples that were collected from urine are oxymorphone, oxycodone, and ethanol. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, oxymorphone is both an analgesic, a narcotic analgesic, but it's also a metabolite of oxycodone. Both oxycodone, also known as Percocet, is commonly used as a pain reliever in a hospital setting and outpatient for that matter. And so we detected it in the urine only, not in the blood. We actually looked for it in the blood. And so that meant that at the time of the sampling, that was in the morning of it was several hours after his injury, there was evidence of there having been Percocet. It's impossible to say when that Percocet was administered.
All right, and what about the ethanol?
Normally, we analyze ethanol in blood. In this case, we did it in the antemortem urine because there was not very much antemortem blood. and we'd like to have the sample be as close to the time of the injury as possible. And so alcohol, unlike marijuana, alcohol distributes freely throughout the body. And so we found 0.14%. Now this is in urine, it's always higher than it would be in the blood. And so, for example, you may be familiar with the per se for driving of 0.08. This would be higher than that in the blood, but not much. But it was a sample collected hours after the injury, and so he would have been eliminating the alcohol over that time, and so it would have been even higher if we could have done a sample of blood at the exact time of the injury.
Your Honor, can we approach, please?
You may.
Oh, thank you so much.
Mr. Scorsese. Second, please.
Absolutely.
And we'll set, thank you.
All right, so we'll go ahead.
Doctor, we've talked about substances that were contained within Mr. Vasquez's urine sample. Let's move on to what was in the blood. Talk briefly about fentanyl, and then there's also a reference to norfentanyl. So can we talk about fentanyl first? You kind of briefly touched on it before there was an objection. How much was in his system?
0.44 nanograms per ml. That's a very tiny number, but fentanyl is very potent, and so the therapeutic range in a typical individual who is not tolerant to opiates is 1 to 2 nanograms per ml. This was 0.44, so it was just below the therapeutic range. He was a large...
Mr. Scorsese.
Doctor, when you indicate below therapeutic range, that means if you're treating somebody with that particular substance? Is that what you mean by the therapeutic range?
Yes, when a physician orders certain drugs, if they're not having the effect that's desired, the question is why are they not having the effect? And so therapeutic ranges are those blood concentrations at which most individuals would have the desired effect. And so if a measurement is made that is below the therapeutic range, then there's an indication that a dose adjustment should be made rather than to conclude that the drug doesn't work. What I was saying is he was a large individual and therefore probably would require a larger dose than a normal individual, or a person of a smaller stature. And but I don't know. You can't tell from the blood level when it was administered or how much it was that was administered. If a lot was administered, then it would have had to have been administered further back in time to allow it to come down to this amount. If a lesser amount was administered, it might have been in the hour or two before the sample was collected. And it's impossible to tell the difference between those two.
And speaking of that, Doctor, when was this particular blood sample collected for Mr. Vasquez?
It was about 6 a.m.
On what date, do you recall?
on the 31st of January.
And that was at the Mercy St. Vincent Medical Center, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, there's other substances that were in the blood, norfentanyl. What is that?
Norfentanyl is a metabolite of fentanyl. And unlike, we were talking about cannabinoid, norfentanyl is actually active. And so we would, the analgesic effect would continue in the presence of norfentanyl. It was not detected. We did not detect norfentanyl. Now, this gives us some information about when the drug was administered. We would expect there would be norfentanyl. If it was further back when the fentanyl was administered, it might have been that we didn't find the parent and would only find the metabolite. Since we didn't find the metabolite and we did find the parent, that means that it was more likely more recently from the time of the sample.
Now, doctor, I'm going to butcher this word. Levetiracetam. I know I'm saying that improperly. Is Keppra another term for that?
It is.
All right, and what is Keppra?
Keppra is an anticonvulsant. It slows down nerve impulses in the brain by reducing the release of certain transmitters within the brain. So it would be like we call it a depressant, but depressant doesn't have anything to do with depression like psychiatric depression. It has to do with the nerve impulse conduction in the brain is slowed. Individuals with head injuries very often may have seizures, and so it would not be uncommon to have a drug like this found in such an individual.
So is it possible that Mr. Vasquez received a dose of Keppra while he was being treated at Mercy St. Vincent Medical Center?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross.
Good morning, Dr. Forney.
Good morning.
So you've, during your evaluation of Mr. Vasquez, you did conduct a forensic toxicology final report, did you not, sir?
Yes.
And I want to hand to you what's been proposed as Defendant's Exhibit B. Could you please look at that?
Okay, that's in my packet. That's in his packet.
That's in your packet. That's the first page of your packet, but I just want you to just look at our exhibit there, the one page. And is that your forensic toxicology final report, sir?
It is.
Is that your name on the bottom that you authored this document?
Yes, it is.
And at this time, I'll move to admit Defendant's Exhibit B in reference to his toxicology report.
I'm surprised I didn't get a chance to review the document.
If I can approach the witness, I believe it's easy. I have no objection, Your Honor. I plan on admitting that along with my composite Exhibit 16.
All right. Then it'll be received. I apologize, sir. This is B.
Yes, Your Honor.
It will be received.
Now, Dr. Forney, I'm sorry, I'm standing here. I don't mean to be disrespectful. Now, looking at what you're looking at the screen.
So does that show up on your screen there?
It does.
Okay.
Okay, very good. So, you don't deny, Dr. Forney, that this individual, Mr. Vasquez, had marijuana in his system, correct? You see that the first one there, THC, marijuana metabolite?
Yes, it had a metabolite of THC in the system, correct.
That's marijuana, correct, sir?
THC is in marijuana.
Yes.
The carboxylic acid is not in marijuana, but it's a metabolite that the body makes.
All right, and he also had fentanyl in his system, is that
Yes.
correct, sir?
Yes.
Right, and Dr. Forney, can you just, do doctors prescribe fentanyl to go get a prescription of fentanyl?
Yes.
They do.
Well, it's used in the hospital.
It's used in the hospital, but it's not prescribed through the pharmacist, is it, sir?
It's not, no, it's not commonly prescribed because of the way in which it's absorbed. Something like Percocet, which can be taken in a pill, would be more likely to be prescribed as an outpatient.
Right. With this fentanyl, sir, you would agree with me, Dr. Forney, that he's had to have it either at a hospital or off the street.
Yes.
Is that a fair statement?
It is.
No. And you don't know if he was at the hospital either days before, or months before, or weeks before, correct?
I don't.
And then there's oxy, and I'm sorry, as to fentanyl, I think you already said, sir, that's a very potent drug, is it not, sir?
It is.
Even little bits of it can literally kill you, right?
Yeah, the lethal dose can, depending on how pure it is, can be very small. Yes, that's correct.
And he had also oxymorphone in his system, correct, sir?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what that is, sir?
Yeah, it's a opiate analgesic and a metabolite of oxycodone.
Okay. And he also had oxycodone, correct?
Yes. Now, these are in the urine,
Okay.
which means we didn't find them in the blood, so they were not acting at the time the blood sample was drawn.
And one question, sir, they were in his
Under the
system.
urine sample, excuse me.
They were in his system, right? I mean, you just didn't grab it out of his mouth. These were in his system, in his
It
urine.
was in his urine.
And there was ethanol, correct?
Yes.
He was legally intoxicated, is that correct under Ohio law?
Yes.
There's sertraline, correct?
Sertraline, yes.
Sertraline. There's norsertraline, correct?
Norsertraline, yes.
Okay. And there was levetiracetam, correct?
Yes.
Sorry if I'm butchering these names.
Yes.
And we talked about levetiracetam being Keppra, which is a anti-seizure medicine, correct, sir?
Yes.
And you would agree with me if an individual had seizures, he's had prior brain injury, is that correct?
Well, there's many different causes of seizures, but brain injury would certainly be one of them.
Thank you. And you can't say for certain, sir, who administered this, whether the drugs that was in the system, whether it was the hospital or whether it was before the hospital took control of this individual, correct?
That's correct.
And you would agree with me, Dr. Forney, that these medicines, these drugs, can have severe interactions with one another. Wouldn't you agree with me on that?
Well, whether they're severe or not depends upon how much. But they definitely, the CNS depression is definitely an additive thing.
And you would agree with me, some of them could alter the blood pressure or the heart rate of this individual.
Not in the concentrations we find. For example, alcohol would have to be much, much, much higher before it affected the heart. But certainly in very, very high concentrations, it can affect the heart and therefore the blood pressure. The opioids, again, typically in a lethal setting, as an end-of-life sort of thing, certainly will affect the heart, but not 0.44 fentanyl, for example, or the fact that there's no oxycodone or oxymorphone in the blood.
Now, I understand, sir, that individually may not be so severe, but all of these different drugs combined, couldn't that have a severe effect on this particular individual?
Not in the amounts that we detected.
Wouldn't you agree that this Keppra or levetiracetam is, again, a seizure medicine, And if you could please describe to the jury what a seizure is. Isn't a seizure a nerve, what's it called, that's controlling the brain, which the brain controls the heart, that could cause possible stroke if not addressed?
I think I understand your question. I'm pausing
Sure, I understand.
because
And I understand you have
I want to understand your
you
question.
have an in-depth view of
A seizure is when the electricity in the brain goes out of control. It's not really a short circuit, but it would be too much firing of nerves. And so to either treat that or to prevent it, slowing down what's going on at the switches, which are called synapses, which is where Keppra works. It reduces the release of the transmitter. The transmitter goes from the hot side to the cold side, very much like a electrical switch. Instead of a piece of metal closing the circuit, the signal comes down and it releases a chemical that goes across. Keppra slows down the release of that chemical, so there's not as much being released. So that makes it more difficult for the electricity in the brain to get out of control.
Isn't it true that the brain controls the heart, the breathing, the nervous system?
Well, the heart is controlled by several things. The heart will beat by itself without any control. It is slowed down by the vagus nerve, which comes from the brain. It's sped up by epinephrine, which comes from the adrenal glands, and the final, what the heart rate is dependent upon these different things. Keppra is not working on the vagus, it's not working on the adrenal gland or on epinephrine or norepinephrine. It's working in the brain on the synapse, as I described.
But the brain does play a role in the individual's heart. Wouldn't that be a true statement?
Yes.
Thank you. Redirect.
Doctor, if somebody has suffered a head injury from blunt force trauma, would Keppra be potentially administered to treat that?
It would. It would.
All right, and defense counsel asked a question about the combination of substances that were found in the urine as well as Mr. Vasquez's blood sample. And he asked if the combination of those would have a negative impact, and can you just reiterate what your response was?
Well, we found fentanyl and we found alcohol in the urine, but that, in my opinion, is that there was alcohol in the blood as well. That the combination of those, that the fentanyl would make the intoxication more pronounced. But certainly nothing like getting to something lethal or something severely toxic.
Okay.
That would be the combination that we detected.
And for clarification purposes, we dealt with this on direct, a little bit on cross. If you find something that is in a urine sample, what does it mean for that particular substance? Has it, quote unquote, passed through the system at that point and done its job? Or is it still active?
No, the urine is essentially on its way out of the body.
Okay.
It's drugs in the blood that are then able to distribute into the tissues where they have an effect. The body tries to get rid of foreign substances, and all drugs are foreign substances. And ultimately, they're metabolized and they're eliminated through the urine. So urine drug levels indicate exposure, but they don't indicate what the effect is at that time. We like to look in the, you say, well, why do urine? We like to look in the urine because urine is pretty clean. It's mostly just water. whereas the blood has got cells and all kinds of fats and proteins and other things. And so when we find drugs in the blood, it's really hard work. We have to use very sophisticated methods that take a lot of time and very expensive. But the urine is real easy. And so we like to screen for things in the urine so we know what we're looking for. And it's very helpful. Urine also concentrates drugs. They're in higher concentration in the urine than they would be in the blood. That makes it easier for us to find as well. But we don't, and we report what we've found, but we don't interpret what is going on at the time the sample is collected from a urine.
So based upon that, you're unable to interpret what a combination of the substances that were found in the urine would have in conjunction with substances that were in the blood, correct?
Well, in the case of alcohol, there is that correlation because it's so freely distributed back and forth. With the case of the other drugs, we can't do that with the other drugs.
Okay. No further questions.
Just real quick follow-up.
Yes, of course.
Dr. Forney, you're not suggesting that any kind of drug that I just take will just go right through my urine and doesn't affect my system. Are you suggesting that, sir?
No. No. What I'm saying is that when we look in your urine, it tells us what happened in the past.
Correct.
But it doesn't really tell us anything about what's happening right now.
Correct. And when this toxicology, when these samples were taken, do you know when that was, sir?
Well, the antemortem samples were taken, that is the before death samples were taken that morning around 6 a.m. at St. Vincent's.
That morning of what day, sir? Was it the day?
The 31st, January 31st.
January 31st. So it was immediately after, a few hours after this individual was taken to the hospital?
Yes.
And when, in your experience, sir, would the hospital have already administered all these types of medications to him by that time?
Oh, yeah, 6 hours, 5-6 hours is plenty of time. But yes.
But you can't tell for certainty whether it was the hospital or it was him before?
You're correct.
Thank you.
Nothing further.
All right, thank you, Dr. Gibson.
Thank you. Thank you for the water.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, it's about 20 after 11. Let me talk to the parties real quick, about witnesses.